Hey guys, welcome back to the YouTube channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Magic Keyboard case for the iPad, specifically the one designed for the 11-inch iPad Pro and the iPad Air, to help you decide whether or not it's worth picking one up. For those of you who want a straight upfront conclusion, the answer is mostly yes. If you own an iPad Air or an 11-inch iPad Pro, then I would highly recommend that you pick up a Magic Keyboard case, and we could probably end the video just there. But for those of you who want a more in-depth justification, stick around because I'll be doing just that. So if we take a look at the design of this thing, this is what really sets it apart from other keyboards and cases. You can purchase this in either black or white, and when you take this thing out of the box, you'll see that we've got a magnetic strip of 3 pins that attaches strongly to the back of the iPad. Like, it's impressive how strong the connection actually is. And it gives us this iconic floating design that the Magic Keyboard is known for. And with this you get about 77 to 127 degrees of tilt adjustment. In 90% of cases this rotation works just fine. However, you may find that in some cases, like when you're lying in bed trying to type, that the rotation is a bit limited. The hinge on this case is actually really sturdy. It's made out of aluminium and it's able to hold the weight of the entire iPad and the top of the case without any issues, which is very impressive. On the left hand side we've also got a USB-C port that can charge the iPad, and Apple nicely included this on the left hand side of the keyboard because when you attach the iPad to the case, the iPad's own USB-C port ends up on the right hand side. So if you're in a tight space with only one short cable that can only access one side of the iPad, you now have that flexibility to choose which side of the iPad that you want to charge from. I wouldn't recommend that you use this port as your default charger, just because the magnetic connection of the keyboard case means that the charging is capped at around 22 watts compared to the usual 26 watts that the iPad typically supports. So you're not only getting slightly slower charging, but you can also only use this as a charger. So if you wanted to connect external peripherals like a USB-C dongle or a Thunderbolt monitor to the iPad through the keyboard case, you wouldn't be able to do that. You'd have to use the built-in USB-C port that comes with the iPad. Still, even though I personally never really had to make use of the side port, I think it's nice that Apple included this for the 1% of cases where it might come in handy. Plus, it also frees up an additional port if you want to connect other accessories to your iPad directly. Also a note that you don't actually need to charge the keyboard itself, since this is running on a magnetic as opposed to a standard Bluetooth connection, which means that it draws its power directly from the iPad itself. And so yes, technically this does mean that using the keyboard case will drain the battery of the iPad slightly faster. However, it's not really noticeable during day-to-day usage, and you'll still easily be able to hit the iPad's all-day battery life rating without any issues. Now, one pet peeve that I do have with the Magic Keyboard is its durability. So I've been using this case for about a year now, and we've got some pretty bad scuffs and marks on it, and a lot of oil marks on the keys themselves. I'd imagine that the white version of this might pick up finger marks slightly less, but it could also collect dust more easily. And now, none of this actually erodes the functionality of the keyboard case itself. Like, it still does the job of typing and protecting the iPad just fine, which by the way is also another benefit of the keyboard case, the fact that it acts as a keyboard and a case at the same time. Also, regarding the weight of this thing, the Magic Keyboard case for the 11-inch iPad Pro and the iPad Air comes in at around 680 grams. Now, for context, my 11-inch M1 iPad Pro weighs 466 grams. So you can see that the Magic Keyboard weighs more than the iPad itself, which is going to more than double the weight of this setup. And this makes sense from an industrial perspective. Like, when you're designing a laptop, you want the base to be the heaviest so that the machine doesn't tip over during day-to-day use. Having said that, the 11-inch iPad Pro with the Magic Keyboard case is still extremely portable. You know, I can easily carry around this thing one-handed with no problems. Now moving into one of the most important aspects to consider when buying a keyboard, and that's the typing experience. And if you've used any of Apple's scissor switch keyboards, whether that's on a MacBook or an iMac, this typing experience is going to feel pretty similar. We've got the exact same keys, like the Option and the Command keys, The only thing we don't have is a set of function keys at the top to control things like the brightness or the volume, which is a little bit annoying. But then again, I don't know if there was much that Apple could do with the limited space that they're working with. The only workaround that I can suggest for this is that you use the Globe C shortcut to activate Control Center, and that will let you access basic functions like the volume, the brightness. Now, according to Apple, you get 1mm of key travel with the Magic Keyboard case, which is apparently the same as the MacBooks and the iMac Magic Keyboards. Although I would argue that there feels to be more key travel with the iPad Magic Keyboard. Maybe that's a function of the base of this thing being so thin. But yeah, even if you've never used an Apple keyboard before, I'd say that the typing experience on this thing is still pretty comfortable. It won't necessarily be the comfort that you get with a traditional mechanical keyboard. And yes, if you are typing away for hours at end on this thing, your fingers probably will experience some level of fatigue. But it's definitely one of the best non-mechanical keyboard typing experiences that I've ever experienced. And I'm able to consistently achieve typing speeds of about 100 to 110 words per minute. Also, we do have backlit keys here, which you can adjust the brightness of through the control center. So you might want to add this option in the settings app by going into control center and making sure brightness keyboard is added, which I think is a nice little touch. Now, another highlight feature of the Magic Keyboard case we have is this built-in trackpad, which works extremely well. It's not relying on the same haptic feedback that you get on the MacBook trackpads or the iMac Magic Trackpad. So we do have an actual physical click here, which is low-key extremely satisfying. And for me, the presence of this trackpad is what really makes the Magic Keyboard such a great buy, because it finally unlocks cursor support for the iPad. Of course, you could just connect an external Bluetooth mouse or a Bluetooth trackpad to the iPad and still use the cursor, but I find that the built-in trackpad just offers that classic Apple experience. For example, it enables you to unlock a whole host of new gestures, such as swiping up from the top to exit an app, or switching between apps, or even scrolling through and zooming in on text. And for me, this is what really transforms the iPad from being just another tablet to being a more compelling laptop-esque machine. And I'd argue that this is the closest laptop experience that you'll ever get on an iPad. Now, a valid question that a lot of you are probably going to have is whether or not this smaller 11-inch keyboard has enough space for you to type on. Because Apple did have to make some compromises with the smaller 11-inch model, like reducing the size of the shift and the arrow keys and the trackpad as well. And yes, having the larger keyboard would of course be nicer. And if you do plan to type away at this thing for hours on end, like if you're a professional writer, then I'd personally rather have the larger 12.9-inch keyboard. But for most tasks, I find that the 11-inch keyboard is just fine. And this is coming from somebody with fairly average hands. I write pretty much all of my YouTube scripts on this keyboard with basically no problems. So I don't envision that you would have any problems either. As far as cons go, the only major one that I can think of is the price. In classic Apple fashion, this keyboard case is priced pretty highly at £319 in the UK. And that's just for the 11-inch model. If you want the larger 12.9-inch keyboard, then you have to pay £379. Now, granted, in the US, I think it costs slightly less at $299 for the 11-inch keyboard, and you can also try looking for discounted versions of this product. But even still, you're paying over a third of the cost of your iPad Air or iPad Pro just on the keyboard case, which is a pretty big ask. Now, my personal philosophy is that if you've purchased an iPad Pro, you've done so because you want the best iPad experience possible, and that money isn't an object for you. Because if money was an object for you, I'd recommend that you'd have gone with the base model iPad. which gets you about 85% of the functionality that an iPad offers for just a fraction of the cost. And so, using that rationale, technically I'd say that getting a Magic Keyboard case is worth it for you if you've purchased an iPad Pro. And again, if you've got an iPad Air or are thinking of getting an iPad Air and you're concerned about the price of the Magic Keyboard, I'd question why you're getting the iPad Air over, again, the base model iPad if you don't plan on using the Magic Keyboard case with it. Like, sure, okay, you get the Apple Pencil 2 support and the slightly nicer display, along with a bit of extra performance on the iPad Air, but for most intents and purposes, they are pretty much the same tablet. The main difference being that the iPad Air lets you use the Magic Keyboard and it unlocks this more laptop-esque setup. So to answer the original question, should you think about purchasing this Magic Keyboard case? And my answer would be mostly yes. It offers a world-class typing experience whilst transforming the way that you interact with your iPad on a daily basis. Now, if you're somebody who uses their iPad mostly for content consumption or for drawing and you're not really doing much typing on a keyboard, or maybe you do most of your typing on the Mac instead, I can see why the high price tag of the Magic Keyboard would be a reason not to go for this thing. But if I'm being totally honest, I almost view having the Magic Keyboard and to some extent the Apple Pencil as being integral to unlocking that full iPad experience. And if you're looking to purchase an iPad Air or an iPad Pro, you might be looking at the price tags of the tablets and saying, okay, £999 for an 11-inch iPad Pro, not bad. But you have to remember that that only includes the price of the tablet. Once you stack on the Apple Pencil and the Magic Keyboard to unlock that full iPad experience, you're going to be spending upwards of £1,000. And so you're going to want to take these additional costs, these hidden costs, into consideration. So yeah, keep that at the back of your mind. Anyways, that brings us to the end of today's video. Let me know down in the comments below what you think of the Magic Keyboard case and whether you think it's worth buying it or not. As always, if you found this video helpful, leave us a like, and if you'd like to see more content like this in the future, hit subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.